What's going on, guys? Welcome back. More MMA commentary for you. Anthony Lionheart Smith on with me to talk about the whole Mickey Gall CM Punk situation and what it's evolved into. And to me, as a fan, it's what I want to see. I like to see, a guy like Mickey come out, independent circuit aside, looking for a fight aside. This is a guy that came out, distinctly called and said, listen, this is the person I want to fight. And sure, there's some people that probably chuckled when you've got a guy, fighting in front of maybe 1,000 people saying, I want one of the biggest draws in the history of the sport right now in terms of crossing over from wrestling to MMA, one of the very few to do it. And then obviously gets the call to UFC, is basically said, here's your opponent. If you beat him, you can get CM Punk. And that's essentially what's going to happen. As somebody who's put their whole life into this, who isn't, CM Punk from a WWE standpoint, who doesn't come over with, a Brock Lesnar-esque background, do you have any animosity towards somebody that sits back and thinks, hey, listen, I'm a wrestler, I'm an athlete, I can go do MMA?
Initially I did. I was a little upset about it's a total personal thing. I had a little animosity about the whole CM Punk thing to begin with because it goes back to what I talked about before with the Bellator circus show, with the Dada 5000 thing and people getting opportunities that they necessarily probably don't deserve. But as it's gone on, I've kind of warmed up to it a little bit. And I think it's more or less the way that CM Punk has carried himself and the things that he said and his humble attitude towards the fighters in the sport. I watched an interview one time and he said that he understands the grief that he's getting from some of the UFC middleweights and from fighters around the world, because he understands that we put a lot of work in to get where we're at. He kind of came in on his name. And just the fact that he understands that and he's not upset about it because he can understand where people are coming from, that spoke to me a lot. It was almost like, okay, he understands, he gets it. So it almost made me like him a little bit. You know what I mean? It was easy for me to say, well, at least he understands. Because a lot of guys wouldn't be like that. They'd be like, fuck you, I'm here and deal with it, But he wasn't like that, and he really taken the sport serious. And I like how slow that he's, as much as people are pushing it and they want it to have to happen as fast as possible. I think the fact that he is taking it slow means that he's actually putting the time in to be as prepared as he can be and not just show up, not knowing what the hell he's doing, going and making himself look stupid and proving all of us right. If he was to do that and came in and got smoked and made himself look like an idiot, then all of us would be like, we all told you, and just laugh in his face. But the fact that he's really attempting to try to do it the right way, he can't help the fact, the way I look at it, he can't help the fact that he's a superstar in the WWE. So who am I to tell him that he can't try, that he can't come in? Because the more I thought about it, what did I expect CM Punk to do? To go fight in Extreme Challenge somewhere in Iowa? You know what I mean? Is that really a possibility? Someone the caliber of star that CM Punk is, and is that what he's supposed to do? Go fight his way up through regional circuits with 2,000 people in the crowd? I guess that probably wouldn't make any sense either. So if he's gonna do it, I guess his only real choice is to do it at the highest level, because it's kind of the only thing that's fair to him. And at least he can do it through the UFC, where they can make sure that he's not being taken advantage of. I mean, can you imagine what would happen if a regional show tried to bring in CM Punk? That's just a whole shit show of things that could go bad there. So, the longer than it's been, since it's been announced and all that, my whole attitude kind of changed about the situation. And really, and good on Mickey Gall, man. That's super cool that he gets to have that opportunity, because I knew as soon as they talked about the type of opponent that they wanted for him and really the level of skill that CM Punk is at, no one like me is ever going to get that fight, ever. That's never going to happen. Because we're light years ahead of where he's at. And, at the end of the day, that's okay, I guess. I'm interested to see how it goes.
I, too, changed with his demeanor. And I think to me, when I started to see some of the background, interviews with UFC Fight Pass, where he was very respectful, he almost came across very humble. And like you said, I think he was coming from an elite level of wrestling. Okay, the highest level of professional wrestling there is. Where was he going to transcend over to? Like you said, with Gladiator Challenge, $10 a ticket, 300 people in the crowd. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So for him to come over, especially after Mickey won, and he knew at that point that he was going to be fighting him. He walked in, and I don't know, part of me doesn't like that, as a fan, he walks in the cage, which, something maybe he really hasn't earned to this point, to go in there. That seems a bit, WWE-esque, if you will. But to go in there to shake his hand, to congratulate him, and I believe he said something like, nice job, or I would have liked to see more, because it was a relatively quick finish. He almost said, like, listen, you're here, I'm here, I respect what you just did, and I'm not going to make it that easy on you. It was a very classy way of saying, I'm ready to fight you, without any type of cockiness or any type of, arrogance, which certainly he would be entitled to come over to. I mean, he's losing, I would only assume that he is losing a fair amount of money, leaving where he was to come where he is. That's complete speculation on my part, but I can't imagine that there's anyone looking. He's not the immediate draw. Is my thought with that. He doesn't come in, mainlining a card there, and okay, well now you're possibly, on the prelim card. We're going to pay you more than the main line. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So at some point, his heart has to be there because he's given up some of his wallet to do it. And I respect that. I certainly will.
You know what? If you actually watch the interview, I believe it was on Fight Pass as well. It was a pretty long, extended interview that he did immediately following that event after the Gall fight. He actually said that he didn't want to go in the cage. That he wanted the first time him stepping in the octagon to be when he fought. I think that the UFC brass that kind of pushed him in there to kind of promote it just a little bit. But I thought that was super cool that he didn't want to go in until he was actually fighting. Because I kind of had something similar myself. There was a few, I had a bunch of friends that were in the UFC before I had ever gone there. And, if I forgot a pair of gloves or something, or anime gloves or whatever, like, here, wear these. And they throw me a pair of UFC gloves that they had actually worn in the fight. And I would never wear them. I would never put them on. I always told myself I'm not going to put on a UFC glove until I'm at the UFC. So I know what that meant to me. It was almost like as bad as you wanted to put them on, I wouldn't do it until I earned it. So it was like he didn't want to go in there until he'd earned that right. So I thought that spoke to me as an athlete and as a fighter in the UFC. That's really spoke a lot to me, especially where his head's at. And when you bring up the money thing, he probably retired with millions and millions of dollars from the WWE. He doesn't have to fight. He doesn't have to do anything if he doesn't want to. So the fact that he's doing it isn't motivated by money. It's he wants to. He just wants to. And who am I to badmouth someone's dream? You know what I mean? It's not like he's trying to make the sport look bad. As I think like Dada 5000 did. He's not disrespecting anybody. He's not talking shit. He's not saying he's not even saying he's the best fighter in the world. I believe one of the interviewers asked him something about, "Are you ready?" And he honestly couldn't answer the question. I don't know. I don't know if I'm ready. I'm ready when my coaches say I'm ready. So for someone who hasn't been in the sport or even trained, MMA that long, for him to have the mentality of like, I'll just do what my coaches tell me to do, it's all right by me.
Let's say that he goes in and he does lose. Do you then use him as a baseline with, you had mentioned it before, any, outside athlete that comes over and wants to say, well, I can do this. I could have done that. Do you think that he has that weight, that pressure, that burden to stay, essentially this is what any WWE wrestler, this is what any external, sports entertainment, athlete could do. And on the other side of that, are you looking at Mickey and putting on pressure to where, okay, you kind of have to defend the home turf here, buddy, and beat this guy and show him you just can't come over here and put on a pair of UFC gloves like your Brock Lesnar, who is a different class of athlete, in my opinion, than CM Punk. I mean, he just is. are you trying to set that standard where you say, listen, you have to show him the door, show him it's not going to be, as easy as he thinks it is, even if we've talked about he maybe doesn't think it's that easy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the most of the pressure is on Mickey Gall. He's, as you said, he's kind of he's got to hold one up to the house. So, because if he comes in and he gets beat by a guy that hasn't been training that long and kind of came over late in his career, athletic career at least, and loses, then that, what does that say about you? It makes it look like what we do is easy, and that's why I was really glad to see the UFC, even though he did get a very green, very inexperienced, at least especially at the pro level, opponent. At least the one that they did find was good. Mickey Gall is good, and it's kind of hard to tell how good he is because I think that his opponent was bad. The guy he fought sucked. I mean, there's really no way to sugarcoat that. He didn't fight a very good guy at all. But from a fighter standpoint, I could tell just by watching him fight that he has some skills. He has some serious ability, and he looked good. He had really, I was really impressed with his killer instinct. His explosive, he was explosive. His power was there. So I'm glad that they found him someone that was at least, that was at least qualified. I think that he got a high level new guy, and on CM Punk's end, I don't think that he's probably really putting a whole lot of pressure on himself. I'm sure he's feeling it from outside sources, but I think that from what I can gather by watching his interviews and hearing him talk, I gather that he's a pretty mentally stable person. It looks like he's pretty in tune with what he wants and what he's trying to get out of this. So I think that he's kind of in his own lane. I get the vibe that he's just doing his own thing and he's focused on what he wants to do. But at the same time, if he comes in and shoves his ass out there and makes himself look stupid, I think that he probably closes the door for a lot of people that want to do the same thing.
Let me close this out with this question to you. As a UFC fighter yourself, I'm sure you've talked to a lot of people, the pressure, the desire, the need, the want to be on the UFC 200 card just because of what it will mean in the history of the UFC, not just obviously the fact that they made it 200, but I think people look back, even, UFC 100, these were, centennial cards. Do you feel like this is a fight that deserves to be at UFC 200? Do you feel like this should be something that's set aside on a pedestal, but not of that prominence?
No, I don't think it should be on UFC 200. I think that I think the UFC 200 should be stacked, and I think it should be stacked with fights that are guaranteed to be good fights. And I can't. If you put me in those matchmakers' shoes, I can't say that the Mickey Gall CM Punk fight is going to be a good one because you don't know. We don't know what CM Punk brings to the table, and Mickey Gall is relatively unknown. You don't really know what he brings to the table. We know what he can do to a guy that's been a top sport, but what we really don't know anything about CM Punk and what he brings. So I think that putting that on UFC 200 is a big risk. Because I think that it should be packed with guys that are proven to bring good fights and guys that really know what that means. Like if I was on UFC 200, I know that there's a burden on me to make sure that the fans and everyone at home are pleased. Because, like you said, it's a centennial card. It's a huge opportunity to be remembered forever in the UFC world. But I know what that means, and I know that burden, and I know what it feels like to have to perform. And I don't think either one of those guys do, at least in the MMA world. So nothing. I don't think it's really a knock on either one of those guys. I think that they both have to. Since they're both pretty much new guys, I think that they both should have to probably earn that a little bit, and show that they're worthy. And even not even worthy enough to be there, more or less worthy enough that they're gonna perform, and that they're gonna, there would be no question in any MMA fan's eyes if Anthony Smith is on UFC 200, you're gonna see a good fight because I've never been in a bad one. Win or lose. You know, I've never lost a boring fight, and I've never won a boring fight. Never happened. Um, so, and everyone knows that would do any kind of research on me. So I think that card should be filled with guys that are just like that they are exciting no matter what. And that's just me speaking for